Guys, they will be reading a book called Space Dramas. It is written and illustrated by Woodford. Have you ever felt scared into going into a dark room? Imagine then how astronauts must feel when they set off in a rocket into space. The world is full of stars and planets is dark and distant and is full of danger and excitement. A rocket launches astronauts into space with enormous power and speed, but a rocket is a complicated machine and many different things can go wrong. Reaching space safety is only the start of the astronauts' mission. Astronauts often have to do a number of dangerous jobs in space. They are a long way from Earth if anything goes wrong, and sometimes it can be difficult to get them back to Earth safely. Fortunately, most of the astronauts who travel into space live to tell their dramatic tales, dreamy dramas. In the 17th century, a German astronomer called Johannes Kepler tried to imagine what traveling into space would be like. He thought people might go to the moon on a bridge made out of shadow and find it full of scary creatures like huge snakes with wings. Fortunately, nothing like this was found when astronauts reached the moon in 1969. Look for the rings of Saturn. Look out for boxes like this with the planet Saturn in the corner. They contain extra information and amazing space buster facts and figures. When a rocket blasts off from the launch pad, no one can tell if it will shoot safely into space or explode in a huge fireball. For an astronaut, blasting off on a rocket is a bit like sitting on a giant firework packed with explosive. Sometimes launches end in disaster. In 1998, a Titan IV-A rocket blew up just 42 seconds after its launch from Cape Canaveral in Florida, USA. The explosion destroyed a 1 billion satellite that was on board. The Challenger's disaster, the most shocking space disaster so far, happened on 28th of January 1986. Just 73 seconds after blast-off, the space shuttle Challenger exploded in midair because of a fault in one of its rocket boosters. The world is stunned by the terrible accident in which 7 of the astronauts on board were killed. 2 years earlier, a faulty computer program caused the European Ariane 5 rocket to go off course. The rocket was worth $500 million and had taken 10 years to develop. It had to be destroyed by people on the ground just 40 seconds after blast-off. Inside a rocket, astronauts are protected from any dangers, but sometimes they had to go outside the spacecraft to explore space or go to make repairs. Stepping outside a spacecraft is called a spacewalk. The astronauts look as though they are floating in space, but they are usually tied to their craft by long support lines called umbilicals. Astronauts wear space suits to protect their bodies from the incredible heat and cold and from tiny meteorites that may crash into them. Large helmets like goldfish bowls provide them with oxygen. Gold visors can stop the sun's dangerous rays from hurting their eyes. In 1965, the Russian astronaut Alexei Leonov became the first person to walk into space. The next year, American astronaut Edwin Buzz Aldrin made a spacewalk lasting 2 hours 20 minutes, making space safer. The worst thing that could happen during a spacewalk could be an astronaut's umbilical to break. The astronaut might drift off into space, never to be seen again. Fortunately, NASA has now developed a special kind of jetpack called SAFER, S-A-F-E-R. If an accident happens, the astronaut can use this to fly back safely to the spacecraft. Lost in space. Spacecraft are sometimes controlled by the astronauts on board and sometimes by mission control. When contact is between a mission control and the spacecraft is lost, the results can be dramatic. Space probes are spacecraft with no astronauts on board. They are sent out to explore the universe. In 1999, NASA lost a 125 million probe called Mars to Climate Orbiter because of a simple mistake. The NASA scientists had been using metric measurement, while the satellite's builders had standard American measurements. As a result, the satellite was steered too close to Mars and burned up in the Martian atmosphere. Stranded on the moon, when the Apollo astronauts set off for the moon in 1969, some people worried that they might never return. America's President, Richard Nixon, had prepared a speech to read out to the world if Neil Armstrong and his colleagues became stuck on the moon. Fortunately, the mission was a success, and the astronauts returned home safely. Big bangs. Most of the space dramas we hear about happen when astronauts set out to explore the universe. But some very dramatic things happen naturally in space. These include the Big Bangs caused by meteors and solar flares. Meteors are lumps of rock that travel through space. When a meteor hits Earth, it can make a massive pit or crater. One of the best-known meteor craters on Earth is Barrander's crater in Arizona. It is thought to have been made at least 50,000 years ago. Some scientists believe the dinosaurs became extinct on Earth when a giant meteor crashed into our planet 65 million years ago. The chances of this happening again are very small because the universe is such a big place. The crashing comet. In July 1994, more than 20 pieces of a comet called Shoemaker-Levy 9 smashed into the planet Jupiter. Astronomers worked out that the explosions were bigger than those caused by a nuclear bomb. The biggest bangs in the solar system are caused by solar flares. There are tremendous explosions taking place so often from the surface of the sun. Each one has the same power as millions of large nuclear bombs exploding at once. Dangerous dockings. Spacecraft need to join together or dock with the space station to allow people to get on and off the space station. Docking is difficult and dangerous, and sometimes things go wrong. The very first docking of two spacecraft happened in 1966. The rocket Gemini 8 was piloted by astronaut Neil Armstrong. It was supposed to dock with an unmanned craft called the GITV, Gemini Agna Target Vehicle. It took 6 hours for the craft to meet up, and then disaster struck. A fuel leak made the two docked spacecraft spin round and round. Armstrong decided to separate them, but this only made things worse. Soon, his spacecraft was spinning so fast once a second that Armstrong and his co-pilot could no longer see properly. Armstrong had no choice but to end the mission. Gemini 8 made an emergency splashdown in the Pacific Ocean, and the astronauts were recovered safely. A hit for MIR. Russia's space station, Mir, provided lots of drama during its 15 years in space. One of the biggest dramas happened in 1997 when an unmanned cargo ship weighing over 7 tons crashed into Mir during a docking exercise. The Russian cosmonauts and U.S. astronauts on board had just half an hour to fix the damage. Later, they had to carry out a dangerous spacewalk to turn Mir's solar panels towards the sun so the craft could regain power. This book has 30 pages. This is page 15, which is half of it. See you later. Bye.